CDCs and things like that work. Can you guys see me and hear me? Good evening. How's everyone doing on this awesome Wednesday? Hopefully, I see people from X. I've got Facebook. It says that Instagram is working, but to be honest, I have no idea if it is or not. I'm going to go check to see if you guys can even see me from my phone. Oh, you can, I think. Oh, okay. Yeah, it was just a little delayed. Okay. How's everybody going? I guess we'll get right into it because it's only half an hour. A bunch of people were asking what the long-term goal of the elites are and with the CBDCs and how that plays into the digital IDs with the 15 minutes and so forth. Also, I'm really sorry I'm not wearing makeup and I don't have an eyelash filter I can use on here like I can on TikTok. So, so anyway, a lot of people were asking about CBDCs. What are they? Why are they so dangerous? What is the issues? What issues will we run into? And then with digital IDs, how they fit in, how everything fits in with the WHO, the World Economic Forum, the UN, and so forth. So I figured I would do a complete introduction of everything from top to bottom. So what a lot of people may not know, or you guys do know, is that there is something called, so you've got the central banks, and the central banks then monitor themselves through something, it's a board, I guess, that overlooks and overwatches the central banks themselves. But it's the central banks that pretty much look over the central banks. And the guy who's been pushing the CBDCs, his name is Augustin Karsten, I guess. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. He's the general manager for the banks that overlook the central banks as well. So and then with the central banks, because they pretty much own the jurisdictions and local banks, everything that the central banks do, then the other banks have to follow in suit. So there's been something called, I guess, it's called the CBDC World Tracker. And they've been watching the algorithm and how the algorithm works with CBDCs. And so far, it's failed every single time. Like every single time the CBDCs have been implemented in a research kind of way, it has actually failed in their research system. But yet they're trying to push it through very fast. And a lot of people don't also understand that 2020 was actually not supposed to happen in 2020. They sped up that plan. They were supposed to have CBDCs in place and digital IDs before they could do 2020 so that they could actually hold us down and control us in every aspect of every kind of way. So I guess, let me see how I share the screens again. I said I'd get smoother with this, but I don't know if that's going to happen. So let me just share my screen here. I'm going to go to the central bank, share. Okay, so if you guys can see this. This here is called the Central Bank Digital Currency Status, or CBDC World Watch. So a lot of humanitarian groups are watching the CBDCs and how it will be rolled out. So far, even the SIB, or the bank that kind of overlooks all the central banks, so the central banks of the central banks, and the general manager, Augustin Karsten, he's from Mexico, he's basically even saying that this will be complete control over humanity. So they're not even hiding it. So if you look at here, Canada right now is proof of concept. So we're past the stages of research. We're proof that it might actually work. Pilot project are still running in these countries. The blue means that they're still being researched in these countries. And the red means that they've been canceled. That means something about the algorithm failed. Now, the longest running CBDC tracker comes from Sweden and Norway up here. And it has failed, I believe, 5 times now. So a lot of people are like, oh, are they going to crash everything and then bring in CBDCs? They could, but I think they will bring in CBDCs and then say that something crashed it, such as, a hack, a cybersecurity issue. so that way they can bring in a lot more regulations. But right now there are no regulations for CBDCs. They're coming up with them. So I'm not really sure why England is pushing them as hard as they are. I think they're realizing that they're losing control over the populace. And if they can get everybody on CBDCs, then they can track everybody's money, and they can also go in and cancel your bank accounts, cancel what you have. So, okay, there's different parts to this plan that all kind of fit in, and it's really hard to explain. So you have the CBDCs, which will be digital coins. Now, I know what everyone's thinking. Well, we're already using our debits and everything can be tracked online. 100%. That is part of the CBDCs. But with CBDCs, they want to take cash completely out of circulation. That means every transaction, every lemonade stand that a child makes, everything will be completely traceable and trackable. However, there's a lot of organizations that work for certain governments that I don't know how they will survive if CBDCs come in. Specifically, I'm talking about illegal drugs being moved around the world by certain government agencies, or even certain, groups that work for governments that don't really say it. But Canada came up with that solution, and the Canadian government is making drugs on their own. So that's how they will do it. They will first have to legalize drugs. They will have to legalize all illegal activities, which is why the degeneracy and all of that is coming in, including prostitution and so forth, so that everything can be tracked and traced. Now, a lot of people are saying, what if we go back to gold or, silver? That is up to the person or the business, I guess, that's making them, that's carrying on the business. However, if you look at the reality of that, you would have to have different silver and gold prices every single day, and you would have to go to the store, and it might fluctuate up and down depending on what you're trying to buy. And a lot of businesses won't do that, because now you've got the security issues of having silver and gold and so forth, and having to put that into the banks and so forth. So what a lot of people also don't understand is that with the CBDCs, what they're planning on doing is capping your savings. So let's say you have $10,000 in your savings account. That's the cap that you're allowed to have. If you have anything over that, you will have a certain amount of time to spend that money, or it will go into the abyss and it will just disappear. Then now that's control of monetary value things. Then you will have the digital ID, which will encompass basically everything, every part of your life, to be centralized and governed by one central agency. So as I've said in previous videos, if you have a driver's license right now, that's being governed by the Minister of Transportation. If you have your bank account, that's completely separate from your driver's license. If you have a health card, that's being governed by the Ministry of Health. But with the digital IDs, they want to encompass everything underneath, like in that envelope or in that umbrella. And now you have the money aspect also being digital. So you're controlling that through one governing agency, which is the central banks. And then you have the digital ID. And now they can kind of come in and say that you have a digital footprint or a carbon footprint, which we've already seen at hotels. If you book flights, it will say, oh, this is how many carbon footprint points this hotel stay will, I guess, cost you. These are made up things. First of all, I don't understand how they're calculating these carbon credits. That's just an algorithm that somebody came up with. And so now not only will your money be tied to every single purchase that you have, but it will also then be tied to carbon footprint points that you can have or that you can't have over the year. And slowly but surely, they will put in new legislations and new laws, which will then prevent you from flying unless you have money and you can kind of pay the extra fees for flying. So this is them basically taking the middle class and the lower class and segregating it from the upper classes, so that we can't move, we can't work, we can't do anything, and they can. And that is their entire goal. Now, if you guys know about something called Agenda 2050, that was the original agenda that was set forth. And Agenda 2030 is just goals that they need to accomplish by 2030 in order for them to accomplish Agenda 2050. 2050 and the entire agenda is to have no one living off of their own land, not being self-sufficient, moving everybody from the interior corridor of Canada and the United States, like the middle corridor, and moving them into big cities. And in those big cities, they want to do districts of 15-minute cities. So it's a 15-minute radius of walking, and they want you to have stores, doctors. Apparently your job will be there. You're allowed to travel from district to district if you're working at a different job. And they want to minimize travel, and they want to stop putting in money in keeping up the infrastructure between small towns so that these roads erode. And they're saying this is because they want to allow nature in those corridors to heal. And they will use animal migration, they will use pollution, they will use anything. And that will tie back into the carbon credits that they're going to give us. So if you go on the World Economic Forum, it tells you exactly what they want. They want to decrease meat consumption to basically zero. They only want you to buy 3 items of clothing a year. And they're saying that this is the sustainability levels that we need to live at to accommodate all of the human population growth or the boom that we've had since the 70s. Now, this plan all started with Henry Kissinger in the 1970s when he wrote a memorandum, I think it's called 2200 Memorandum 2022. And in there, he basically told the governments that by the time we hit 2025 or 2020, that the resources in the world would be so scarce that the populace will then uprise and we will overthrow these globalist elites when we realize that we don't have enough water, food for everybody to be fed and be equal. And so the globalist plan now is to destroy the Western world because apparently we consume the most, and to bring us down to a third world level, because it's super easy for them to already control the third world countries. They don't have any regulations. Most of their governments are so corrupt, and they're easily paid off to do whatever the globalists want. So now their last goal is to collapse the West, and they will do that in any way that they can, morally, corrupt the youth, morally corrupt everything, make an upside down world, release criminals so that they can justify the need for, I guess, having cameras everywhere and having facial recognition. So I think it was about 3 years ago, one of the towns in Alberta was signed up for a 15-minute city. And the way they're doing this is through NGOs, non-government organizations. And so these non-government organizations then go into your local towns and they convince your local mayors that they will be given $5 million for infrastructure and everything else if they sign up to 15-minute cities and they reach certain goals by a certain year. And some of those goals for 15-minute cities says wearing a wearable. That means being tracked at every point in your life. And most of those wearables will be able to ping locations to the government, exactly where you are, how you're breathing, how your heart rate is, what you're eating. And then, of course, they're trying to chip everything in stores as well, including having smart fridges so that they know exactly what's in your fridge. A lot of people don't understand that the Roomba, the little vacuums that you have, are actually picking up research to see which rooms you're using the most and if you're living in a house that's too big for you. So that's where the movement of the small little homes came into be, because a lot of the research showed that most people spend time mostly in their living rooms and the kitchen, and that not a lot of people, spend time in dining room areas and also bedrooms. And so they have started to construct homes now in Canada that are much smaller, that don't really have a dining room. And usually they have an island where they kind of combine the kitchen and the dining room together. And that comes from Wi-Fi usage, the Roomba little vacuum usage as well. It maps out your entire home, and everything that you do is basically data being used against you in order to let the government know just how much you're using things, so that they can scale down your life into a tiny, tiny little cube and then control everything about you. And they will do this in the name of climate change, climate science, and the fact that Henry Kissinger wrote a memorandum telling the governments that if they didn't get control of us, either control of the population, so either depopulate us, or control of the resources, that means we have to ration our resources, that there will be an overthrow and that we will kind of go wild as human beings, and we will overthrow the global elites. And that also includes, I don't know if you guys know the line, I think it's in Saudi Arabia that's being built, and it is like about a mile long line, of houses, basically completely encompassed entire town in a mile that could fit millions of people in there. And they're trying to box us into that. Now, the reason why they have to bring in CBDCs and digital IDs is because most of us would pretty much say, no, we're not doing that. We're not going that way. We don't want to go down that way. And so now what they're doing is they're just testing the waters. Even with 2020, they sped up 2020. Not everything was in place and how it was supposed to be. But they pulled that card a little too early. And now their plans, unfortunately, have been revealed, especially with Canada blocking bank accounts after the trucker protest. So that was a huge red flag for a lot of people around the world when they saw the tyrannical overreach of the Canadian Liberal government and what they were capable of doing. And so then the reality of what we're saying right now with the CBDCs and all of these digital IDs has kind of come into more of a fruition than it's just being us conspiracy theorists talking about this. And so a lot of people are really confused because they're like, oh, well, what does the WHO, what does this have to do? What does this have to do with this? So the WHO is just basically another tentacle of the cabal that will tell governments exactly what they have to do in a pandemic, or they will not receive funding. And the funding, of course, comes from central banks. And that's how they all work together. The UN is the tentacle for global climate change and policies and things that, you know, the Western cultures need to kind of follow, even though China decided to pull out of the Paris Accord agreement and they're the number one polluters, including India. But the UN's not going after them or fining them. So everything that is happening right now is voluntary, which is why they needed to infiltrate the government and the Western world with their puppets that would voluntarily drive us into this entire situation. So I hope that kind of makes sense. And the drive really kind of started to speed up from 2010 to 2015. And I think that's because they were setting everything up for 2020. And so now that they have infiltrated the governments with their puppets, and most of their puppets come from another tentacle, which is the World Economic Forum, where they take on losers and idiots like Justin Trudeau, like Keir Strymer, whatever the heck his stupid name is, Macaroni in France there. And they basically take these globalist losers and they brainwash them into thinking and saying and being that puppet for the tentacle of the cabal. And then the WHO will decide how we govern our health, how we govern our bodies, and how the countries respond during pandemics usually that they create. The UN will govern how we do business, how businesses also have DEI. They also have the carbon footprints right now, and they've had for many years. And they've just been testing these ideas on a broader sense. And then slowly they will kind of push them all onto us individually. And so a lot of people don't understand just how vast this is and just how many NGOs there are. There's probably one NGO for every city that is signed up to the 15-minute cities. And the way they present this to the mayors is it's basically like a very green initiative. You know, it's not tyranny. The 15-minute cities will be walkable. Everybody can walk everywhere. People will be healthy. You know, we get to research how much they're eating, what they're using, what they're consuming. And so that way we can save the environment. And a lot of these mayors do not know the game that is being played. A lot of them honestly have no idea. Most of them are aware now, especially because of the awareness that a lot of us have been bringing online. And that is why I always tell people it's super important to be involved in your local politics, because if you have control over the local politics, the globalists cannot penetrate that. And if they cannot penetrate that, then they will have to use force. If they use force, then they will be seen as the tyrannical piles of garbage that they actually are. And also the local governments will then have to force provincial governments or state governments to act exactly the way the locals want them, which will then further influence, nationwide governments. And so that is the game, and that is what is laid out. But the ultimate goal of all of this is Agenda 2050. It's for us to live in the, or I don't know if you guys have read 1984 by George Orwell, but that's basically their end goals. Their end goal is to have us all controlled, all of us having the same diet, all of us being constricted to 15-minute cities or 15-minute districts, where you would actually need permission to go from your district to another district in order to visit family and friends and so forth. And we've already seen them try and phase out vehicles in certain cities by saying, well, there's not enough space, or, we're building these buildings, but there's no parking. The parking will be outside of the city limits. But then you will also need permits for vehicles because they want everyone sharing everything. So that is the goal. And the way they will market this is in these, fancy little ways that make absolutely no sense. So for example, with the CBDCs, right now they're saying we need CBDCs because the inflation is so high, but they're the ones that created inflation by printing money. They're not actually printing, but they're putting it into circulation during 2020, creating the inflation worldwide. And so now they're saying in order for that not to collapse, well, we need CBDCs, and it will also stabilize the economy, which it won't, because we're already on fiat currency. So it's already bullshit. That means if we just take out the cash aspect of things and we put it into CBDCs, nothing will actually change except for the fact that they can trace every single dollar, and that dollar can be traced from the beginning. So for example, if they come up with CBDCs right now, and let's say I give you $1 for a lemonade that I bought, and then you use that dollar to buy bubble gum, they can trace that dollar and how it's been tracked and traced through absolutely everyone for years. That's how much control they actually want over the entire situation. And even the general manager of the central banks even said that this is made to control the populace, to know exactly what we're spending, to know exactly what we're doing with our money, and then to be able to control our savings. When you cannot save your way out of this slave system, then you remain a slave to the system for the rest of your life. And unfortunately, a lot of people think capitalism is bad, and they think that, everything that's wrong right now is with capitalism. But capitalism allows you to move from the lower classes to the upper classes, depending on your work ethic or luck in life, or, how you kind of manage your own money. If they can take that away from us, there will be absolutely no competition with the uber rich for other rich people to move up from the lower ranks to upper ranks to ever be able to compete with the plans that they want. And that is the issue right now, is they have allowed capitalism to get so uncontrolled that there are a lot of millionaires and billionaires that are now competing for how they want to see the world run, and specifically technology companies, for how they want to see the world run. And the old school, the OG globalist elites do not like that in one sense of the way. So their ultimate goal is to basically kind of brainwash people into thinking that you do not need anything and that you will be happy. You will own nothing and you will be happy. You will be in your 15-minute city pods. You won't even need to have a job because the government will probably give you subsidies. But eventually you're going to become useless to the system. But don't worry, Canada already has that solution. It's called MAID, the medically assisted dying program. Switzerland has it. Sweden has it. And that is a way out. And they will probably give people credits for taking their lives sooner to be able to feed their families and so forth. Like the entire system, once it's set up, will be complete and utter control on a digital tyrannical level, to the point where, if the entire grid went down, that would be our only way out of this digital prison that they're trying to create. And eventually, they also want to shut small towns down, which is what Canada is doing with the Canada Post right now. So a lot of people in rural areas will have issues getting mail, will have issues communicating with each other. The whole internet shutdown thing will probably start with Starlink, with people out in, the middle of nowhere, people who want to be self-sufficient, eventually forcing voluntarily for them to move closer to the cities and closer to these 15-minute centers that they want. So I hope that kind of makes sense. I know it's only been a half an hour and it's a super quick half an hour, but that's all my squirrel brain can kind of, muster up. But do you guys have any other questions? I'll take some questions from the comment sections. Let's see. Someone is saying, let's see. There's a lot of comments coming in. Who put all these lunatics in charge of anything? Well, they decided it, and then they infiltrated our governments. So Justin Trudeau's dad was part of Club of Rome. So he was pretty high up in the whole, parasite, these lizard people. I'm totally kidding. It might not be kidding, but you know what I mean? And so what they do is they give their kin. And there's also farms where these kids are either taken from orphanages or from families that are in these circles and given to these organizations to be, how should I say this? From a young age, they're pretty much brainwashed into thinking that we normal humans are an enemy to them, and that they have a solution, and that they have this grand plan for them. And then they embed them into politics in Western societies, where they basically just take orders from their globalist elites and push these countries into a direction that they want. And that slow infiltration, openly told by Klaus Schwab at Harvard, he basically said that he's so happy that he was able to infiltrate 50% of the Canadian government with his pawns for this globalist agenda. And they have so many tentacles out there with NGOs. And then they also create a bunch of social issues within countries, so that we're so busy fighting each other while they put these things in place. Now, with El Salvador, they lucked out. They managed to get a government in that wasn't part of the globalists, and he's actually taking care of his people. So we can see that not everybody is paid by these globalists. Now, you also have to understand that the globalists don't get along with each other. They also have very opposing views, and also different ways that they want the world to run. So they also argue with each other. So sometimes it will seem like, we're going in a good direction with one person, but we're just going in a direction of the other globalist elites of a world that they want. And so it's almost up to us to push back with either our money, with either our behavior. But with money, it is the most effective, because most of these huge corporations are pretty much owned by them. And it's our money that we can kind of use in order to steer what we want and what we don't want. And you can see the cultural shift right now happening against this entire woke agenda that is kind of swinging back slowly. But we also have to be very, very vigilant of which way it's going, and keep track of all of our politicians, and be very involved in local politics, get to know your neighbors, talk openly, just so that people understand kind of which way we're going, because we're all in the same boat. All of us so-called plebs, all of us puros or non-globalists, we're all in the same boat. We're all going down if the ship goes down together. And a lot of people think, oh, well, I'm upper middle class. It doesn't matter. You guys have seen what they did to the Palisades in California, but they're fighting back because they have money. And there's a lot of lawyers in that. So they're the ones that could actually maybe break through it a little bit. But we definitely need to be supporting each other. This is globalist elites and the 1% and maybe the 2% of millionaires against the rest of us. So it doesn't matter if you're super poor or even like upper middle class, it does not matter. They're coming for all of us. And even all of these pawns that they've used in their governments eventually will be fed to the wolves if they overstep anything. And that's called them sacrificing the low-laying fruits. Okay, so one more question. Does anyone have a question? There's so many comments coming up. If you want to keep your kids out of this globalist agenda, make sure that basically teach them what is happening. Most of these teachers are also a bunch of brainwashed idiots. Most of them hate your kids unless they're completely brainwashed, woke psychos. Please teach them the proper history. Teach them how to be self-sufficient. Teach them how to cook. Teach them how to fix cars. Basically, go back to the 80s. Whatever you were taught, teach your kids that plus some more and in detail. And make sure that you let them know that half of their teachers are brainwashed, idiots, trying to brainwash the younger generation into being better robots than the generation prior to them, such as us millennials and Gen X, that weren't, subjected to such harsh brainwashing techniques at a young age. I mean, we had TV, but you could kind of control how much TV or screen time you had. But now you can't really control what these teachers are saying, what they're teaching. And it seems like most of them are teaching feelings and not really any skills or history or anything that will actually help kids in the future be more independent and free thinkers. So if you really want to protect your kids, please teach them everything. I know it may seem harsh, to teach a young child the harsh realities of the world, but the sooner that they understand, the sooner they will know exactly what is happening and they won't fall for the mediocrity of what is happening. So yeah, anybody else? Someone told me to scale back on the cussing. Yeah, sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I work in the oil patch. Cussing's just normal for us. So, what can I say? If cussing offends you, but the fact that I'm talking about anti-pedophilia and being anti-pedophile, that and what's happening, unfortunately, that's the reason why we're going down the toilet. Cussing isn't that bad. They're just words. And honestly, kids are going to learn. They're going to learn eventually. At least I'm not out here, shaking titties and other parts of my body in front of kids or anybody else. So they're just words. Okay, well, I love you guys all. And if you guys want me to talk about anything in detail on Saturday, I will have to do a pre-show then. It won't be live, just because I've got to be somewhere Saturday evening. So if you guys want anything in detail, then I can actually show more evidence, just because my internet right now is super slow and will not, I guess, look into, having a better presentation of something. Someone said F sensitive people. No, I love you guys all. I'll try and not swear, but no promises. Literally no promises. Okay, well, I'll see you guys next Saturday. It will be as I said, it won't be live, but give me ideas on what you want. Someone said, no, I'm not ready to go to bed. You guys want to just sit here? I'll crack open a bottle of wine and we can just, talk about weird shit and call politicians weird names. No, I'm just kidding. Honestly, I will get better at this and I will get my life in order. And I will tell you guys the next time my podcast is on. I'll try and fix whatever the heck this is. And my husband's like face in the background and you can see our big screen TV. Apparently I need one of those green screens, but the cabal that I apparently work for, they didn't send me that shit. So I got to figure it out on my own. I'm totally kidding. There's a bunch of people online who think I work for the cabal. I must be like literally the worst cabal employee ever. And I don't think they know I work for them either, because I don't know if I work for them. But yeah. So the next one, if you guys want to know about banks, I've got so much information on the higher banks and also the Vatican Bank. The Vatican Bank is super sketchy. And I found a bunch of stuff on them because the Vatican is the head of the snake when it comes to all of this globalist stuff. And you guys can see that even through what the Pope is saying and how he's basically pushing all of these like woke agendas and saying that we need to accept them, but it's like enough is enough, you know what I mean? Like we're so freaking like done with that shit. But yeah, next time I'll definitely do a video on all of the banks, how the CBD started, and the Vatican Bank. And like I'll go into like the weirdest rabbit hole, and I'll get a little conspiracy theoristy. I don't even know the word, but I'll definitely go down the rabbit hole a little bit deeper, especially with the Vatican Bank and how they were implemented in some money laundering that may have been included in the Schmepstein files. I can't really say it. I don't want to say it because they're going to take my stuff down. So yeah. Anyways, I love you guys. Happy Wednesday. Is it Wednesday? I hope it's Wednesday. If not, then I did my podcast on the wrong day. But like, who's even counting anymore, right? Anyways, I love you guys. Stay safe. And yeah, next time, let's do a little bit of a deeper dive and an interesting thing on the banks. And I will do a little presentation and it'll get nerdy up in here. Okay, I hope you guys have a good day. Now I got to figure out how to leave this thing again. Oh yeah, I have to press end stream. Last time I just like exited and I just let the stream go. So that's why you guys couldn't watch it right away because I'm a ding dong. Okay, I love you guys and have a safe night. I'll see you guys Saturday again. Okay, bye. End stream. I'm not ending the stream. No, I'm still on the stream. End stream?